Without further delay, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Maria Barnes, a director from Benefits Delivery Services branch with Service Canada, who will lead breathing and stretching exercises that we may use at home or when we go back to the office. Maria, you can start when you're ready.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to be here with you, and the first 15 to 20 minutes of today's agenda are not only going to be very interactive, but they're going to be experiential. So what I'd like to do is just take you through some breathing and stretching exercises, but I think it's important maybe to frame that in the context of what that means to me. And I'm at my home, which I work at 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week I go to my office in downtown Victoria. And I find whether I'm at home, whether I'm at the office, taking a few moments every day actually is my commitment. And it's not very complicated. So I'm really hoping that what we do this afternoon together will be something that you can incorporate into your practice. But back to where I'm coming from. So probably more than my day job, just here as a certified yoga instructor. So I've been practicing yoga for just over 20 years, and I've been teaching in Ottawa, Vancouver, Victoria for the last 5 or so, maybe 6 years. And I have to tell you that if it were not for my yoga practice, which includes stretching, mindfulness, and breathing, I don't think I would have lasted during the pandemic. So as Sarah mentioned, I do work for Service Canada. A few nuggets of how the work for my organization has changed significantly as a result of COVID-19. In my directorate, so I'm the Director of Canada Pension Plan and Foundation Services for the Western Canada and Territories region of Service Canada. And we serve Canadians directly in 7 jurisdictions, so 3 territories and 4 provinces. The example of working from home is a very poignant one for me, what we've learned and what we've accomplished over the last 4 months. So in my directorate of about 500 people who are located in 3 cities, 4 locations, we had 2 people who were working remotely. As of today, we have about 200. So it's been a major shift in changing the way that we work. And in pensions, which is where I work, we are a largely paper-based organization. So what we've had to do is respond very quickly to equip our service agents who are working remotely to have work to do from home, from remote locations. And so we've mobilized getting that work to them in a virtual manner, which was something we didn't do prior to folks returning or reporting to the office. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a long roundabout way is I could have had 100 reasons every single day to say I'm too tired, I'm too busy, I can't possibly take 5, 10, 15 minutes out of my day to breathe, to stretch, to exercise. But fortunately, in February of this year, I had an experience that really encouraged me to continue with that practice. And as I said, when we went into pandemic response mode in mid-March, it really was valuable and gave me the resilience to continue to lead during a time of significant uncertainty and probably an unprecedented opportunity for all of us in our federal public service careers. So let's get started. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I'd like to begin with all of you, and I'm going to be sort of demonstrating a few things. I can't see you, you can see me. So if you are standing like I am, that's fantastic. Or if it's better for you to be seated, that's great too. And we're just gonna begin by closing our eyes and really taking a moment to let the thoughts in our mind neutrally go. And what I'd like you to do is just focus your attention on your breathing. And an aid to help us do this is if you take one of your hands and you put it on your thumb is on your belly button. And when you breathe, you should feel that part of your body, your abdominal muscles, moving. So often when we're stressed, when we're running from one meeting to another, one call to another, one commitment to another, we have a lot of breathing high up in our body. What we want to do is we want to bring it down to our abdomen. So every time you take a breath through your nose, you want to feel your abdomen expand as though a balloon is blowing up. Similarly, when you exhale, you're pushing those muscles towards your spine, inhaling fresh oxygen, exhaling stale air from your lungs. Every time we breathe in, we're bringing in energy and vitality. With every exhalation, getting rid of any tightness in our body, stress or fatigue. So as we slow down our inhalations and slow down our exhalations, we're also slowing down our mind. We're being present in this moment. You're feeling the floor on your feet. You're doing a mental scan of your body. If there's any area that's tight, just make any adjustments you need to relieve that tightness. And throughout our stretching exercises, keep your breathing flowing. So it's very rare in yoga to hold your breath. So we're going to continue to inhale and exhale. Okay, so you can open your eyes. Now, most of us work on computers, a lot of tightness in the neck, in the shoulders, in the upper, middle, and lower back. So let's start by addressing that. I'm going to ask you to bring your chin down to your chest and inhale up, extending your head back, returning it to the middle, turning your head over to one side, back to the center, over to the other side, return to the middle. So now we're going to bring our chin down to our chest again and just do some slow neck circles. Take your time here. It's not about rushing. And if at any moment you feel any pain or discomfort, just come back to a neutral position, because this should all feel like a stretch, but not cause any pain. I'm switching directions. Just continuing with a couple of head rolls here. Keep breathing. And back to the center. So now we're going to bring our shoulders up and push them down. Bring them up and down. One more time, up and down. Good. And we're just going to do those rotations of the shoulders, full circles, one direction. Nice and slow, keep your breathing. And let's go the other way. Wonderful. Now we're going to inhale and we're going to bring our right arm up. And we're just going to take our left hand and run it down our left leg over to the one side. If you can, look up to the ceiling or the sky, depending on where you are. And keep your breathing. Back up to the middle. Let's do it on the other side. Inhaling up, looking up. Just stretching out the lateral part of your body. And release, coming down. So now we're going to take the right hand and bring it up. And with our left hand, we're going to walk our left hand up the spine. And you can imagine, or maybe you can feel it. You've got both of your hands touching. It's not about where your body is positioned. It's about feeling a stretch. So continue to breathe in, continue to breathe out. If you want, you can close your eyes, whatever works for you. Keep that breathing down in the abdominal area. And now we're going to partially release this stretch, taking the left hand and bringing it up to the right elbow. And just the weight of my hand, I'm not forcing, I'm not pushing, but it's just further enhancing the stretch. Okay, let's bring those arms down, give them a shake. I'm doing this up high, but you're probably doing that down low. Then we're taking the left arm, walking it down the spine, bringing the right arm up to meet it, standing up or sitting up nice and tall. Watch the alignment of your head. It should be in line with your spine. My chin, it might not look like it, but it is parallel to the ground. And breathe. Steady, even breaths. You're breathing into the pose here, feeling the stretch in your triceps, upper back, even the wrists and fingers, depending on your positioning. Now we're going to partially release. Take that right arm up, standing up, sitting up nice and tall. And release, coming down. So let's work a little bit on the wrists. So if you're on a keyboard, often you're having your wrists work. Your hands don't have to be in front of you. I'm just trying to be on camera. Going in the other direction, just do with this wherever it feels comfortable for you. And then I'm going to stand back a little bit, and I'm extending my hand out, my arm out, completely parallel to the ground. And I'm going to take my other hand and just gently extend my fingers back. Don't force, don't push. Just a nice stretch for that wrist region. And then bringing the fingers down towards, they're pointing towards the floor, the opposite direction. And we'll release that, going to the other arm. Remember, arm is parallel to the ground. Just giving those fingers a nice stretch to stretch the wrist. And the opposite direction. And release. Now let's bring it down to the lower part of the body. We're going to take our toe, point it to the ground, and just do some ankle circles. So turning your ankle in one direction, going the other way. And then picking the opposite foot, pointing the toes, doing some ankle circles, opposite direction. And return to your comfortable seated position or your standing pose. And again, close your eyes, sitting up or standing up straight. Imagine there's a string attaching your head to the top of the ceiling. Chin is parallel to the floor. Just take a moment to return your attention back to your breathing. With every inhalation, bringing in fresh oxygen, which will energize you for the rest of the day. And with every exhalation out the nose, getting rid of that stale breath. Focus on your breathing and relax completely. Just try and be still, be in the moment, full relaxation. Slowly open your eyes, come back to your body. You can wiggle your fingers, maybe wiggle your toes. And with this, I hope that you've now entered the next part of the agenda a little more relaxed, a little more energized, a little more focused. Thank you for your attention and looking forward to the rest of the session. Sarah, back to you.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Maria, for starting our event with some stretching and breathing exercises and sharing a really good tip that I'm sure we can incorporate during our work days, even if it's for a few minutes. Thank you. Next, we have Alia Denani Isa from Flex GC. She's a policy advisor from Transport Canada, and today she'll discuss the importance of self-care and self-awareness during these difficult times. Alia, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it. And I'm feeling a lot more relaxed. So thank you, Maria. That was great. I think I needed that going into this. So I'm going to share my screen if you'll just bear with me for 2 seconds while I do that. Alrighty. So now you should see my screen. Now at this point, I cannot see any chatter, so I will rely on my Federal Youth Network and Governexx colleagues to let me know if something's off or wrong. So feel free to interrupt because I've lost the chat box at this view. So I'm gonna get started, and then again, feel free to interrupt if something is wrong. Otherwise, I'll ask the moderators to monitor the questions and intervene as needed. So I'm here today to talk to you a little bit more in depth about self-care, and that is something that I preach quite often. So a little bit about me and kind of how I came to this space in terms of mental health. As my bio says, you know, I call myself a community broker because I've been actively involved with horizontal initiatives and kind of bringing people together. But my background, undergrad anyway, was in psychology. And mental health was something that was always important to me. And, you know, I went through a process of deciding whether or not to do the counseling thing or do more of, you know, the policy role. And for me, it worked out and the policy role aligned, but I kind of never lost sight of the importance of mental health. And it's sort of like a mantra that I keep with me in terms of taking care of yourself. And so I've been using these opportunities to try to share that, but I'll caveat that I'm not in any way a professional expert. So if you are looking for that kind of thing, I encourage you to consult somebody who has, you know, a qualifying license in this space. But in terms of peer type tips or just sharing best practices, that's kind of what I'm bringing to this. And I'm also bringing my lens as not only, you know, your colleague or a fellow public servant, but also someone who's worked with crisis line victims on crisis line counseling. So I do have training in that space, as well as some work at the Royal Ottawa, which is a hospital here in Ottawa for mental health. So I am coming to you from unceded Algonquin territory, that being said. So for me, I'm kind of ramping my day up and you are wrapping my day up, and you guys are in the middle of your afternoon for the most part, at least from the folks that I saw who are here from the West Coast. So good afternoon to you guys. And yeah, I think that covers it. And oh yes, sorry. I am coming from Flex GC, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, but there is a resource slide at the end, which I'll share a little bit more about what we do. And I am one of many public servants who are here to help at a grassroots level, get people more comfortable, more aware of best tips and tricks, and get you really going when it comes to working from home. And from the chatter, I noticed that many of you, this is new. So I really hope that this is helpful and timely in some ways. So, okay. So this is what's called an emotional wheel. I'm not sure if you've seen this before. It's been floating around social media. I was fortunate to receive it from a Federal Youth Network colleague who posted it during GC Mental Health Week. And the idea behind this wheel is, you know, you have all these emotions and sometimes you're not really sure how to organize them or where they kind of fall. So this wheel kind of suggests that it can kind of be tailored into, you know, 8 key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 here. There's different variations of this wheel. So 7 to 8 standard sort of emotions, and it kind of helps you identify where you fall. And it's a really good self-reflection, awareness type of piece. So I'm just encouraging you to take a look at it, take a minute, and find your word that describes kind of how you've been feeling through this whole process since March. And maybe where you are now, you could kind of see a pre and a post, and remember that word. So just take a few seconds and do that. Okay, so remember that word and we'll be using that later. So on this slide, there's a range of emotions you can see. Some probably look familiar to you. Some may capture what you were feeling on that wheel. Some may not. It varies, and everyone is coming from a different space in this journey, and a different set of experiences, or preliminary feelings when you were working from home and kind of where you are now. So I'm sure it's kind of resonating with you in ways. There's a lot of feelings when you're working from home during a pandemic, which is not a normal way to work from home, and I'll emphasize that. Your obsessive thinking kind of happens, you're kind of overwhelmed with everything that's going on, and that's compounded with the fact that you're in the middle of a pandemic. So as I noted, many of you are new to this, but I can tell you that your experience is probably not normal because you're juggling way more than you would in a normal work from home situation, because of everything that's going on and the anxiety and the emotions and some of the distractions that come with that, especially if you're sharing your space with other people. So, and I say this knowing that the word remote working also has a bit of that isolating feeling to it too, so that can kind of contribute to how you're feeling. But above it all, like no matter what's going on, what I want you to know and what I want you to get out of this and normalize is that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. And if you have to say this to yourself several times, please do. It's okay not to be okay. When we talk about mental health, and more the last few years, we've seen campaigns around that. We really want to destigmatize that and let you know that it's okay to feel how you do. You have feelings and you have to let yourself do that, and you have to honor kind of where you are in that space. So maybe you were already going through pre-existing mental health issues, and then compounded with the pandemic, you might have noticed things changing for you. Maybe you notice more loneliness, maybe you notice a bit more anxiety or pressure levels. It's all normal. So please honor where you are, wherever that may be in your journey. Think back to where you were in March, where you are today. Maybe you've already made some adjustments to make it work for you. And if you haven't, then you can you can consider some of the best practice advice that's been going around. And you might have heard some of these already. And if you haven't, here are some common themes you'll hear. So creating a routine and sticking to it, that really helps. Even if it's the simplest thing, if you have family members at home, creating schedules and routine kind of helps set that tone and that level of expectation. It may look like, you take the morning shift with a partner to take care of the kids, and then you guys swap. Maybe you have different ways of breaking up your day so that you're able to work at times you normally wouldn't. So the traditional hours of working kind of shift. As Maria walked us through, like a lot of these stretching and breathing exercises can be helpful. So you want to take a minute to do that and kind of regroup. Walking outside, making time for doing some of your favorite things. And also saying no, knowing when to kind of push back, or things that you can take control of and make it work for you. So underpinning all of this, and sort of the motto of the day that you're going to get out of me repeatedly, is self-care. You got to nourish to flourish. I really like that expression. Be kind to yourself, forgive yourself. You've probably heard this word so many times, but really these times for us are unprecedented. As much as I don't like saying that word so much because we hear it and I feel like it's lost that sense of seriousness, it is serious, and it is important for you to take care of yourself and not carry burdens that you shouldn't have to worry about carrying. So little graphics here. And now when we talk about self-care, it can look different for all of us. So my self-care will look different than yours, and that is totally okay. What works for me will not work for you, so do you. There's advice around eating healthy, and if that works for you and makes you feel good, great. If having a Big Mac and supersizing your fries works for you, do you. Moving around is helpful. Blowing off steam, either with coworkers or someone you is a safe or trusted person in your circle. Turning social media on or off, depending on what works for you. Sometimes we need to unplug because with everything going on in the world, there's only so much that we can take, and we can control that off switch, right? Taking a few moments to breathe, getting enough sleep, reaching out, and doing what you love, finding and carving that space. Now, this is an example of something that I just used to illustrate self-care, and that's really about an episode of Friends that I watched many years ago, because that's how old I am. And it's really this spirit of this character, Phoebe, who didn't care what anybody thought, ran in a really funny and unique way with the way her arms were flailing around. And her friend at the time, Rachel, was kind of judging her almost, or didn't feel comfortable being around her in public because it was embarrassing. But at the end of the episode, you realize that Rachel also enjoyed doing it because it just feels good. So I just want to emphasize that be like Phoebe, do what makes you feel good. And if you're not going to take care of yourself, you can't really take care of others around you, right? So this brings me to like the airplane analogy that I like to use, where when the oxygen masks come down, before you put it on, you know, whoever you're caring for, your dependents or anybody else, you got to put it on you first. So if you have kids, before you can do anything for them, you need to be okay, right? So the same kind of idea works here. So now what we're going to do is a bit of an activity. And so if you haven't already or weren't aware, take a few minutes, get a piece of paper, either a letter like standard size or bigger is fine, a couple of sheets of that, something to write with. And if you have access to mini Post-it notes, great. If not, it's okay. So please take a couple minutes, and, you know, ending because of the nice tone that Maria left us with, I'll play some soothing music and give you a couple minutes to just get together there. And for those who are here or just waiting, it's funny when it comes to things like silence during a presentation. I've been talking to colleagues about this, and you really realize how uncomfortable you are when we feel like whenever there's quiet, there's a need to fill that space with like chatter or talking. But sometimes it's really nice to enjoy that quiet and get comfortable with that uncomfortableness you're feeling. So take it in, go zen. Give it another 30 seconds or so. Alrighty, so I hope by now you were able to gather these things, and if you were not, feel free to just listen, and you can still get an idea and note this to do for yourself after this presentation. So take the piece of paper that you have with your paper and draw a large circle. So you want it to take up as much of the paper as possible, but still staying as a circle. Once you've done that, I'll go on to the next slide. But if another way to do this, and this is actually a helpful activity if you have kids or younger people that you'd want to do something like this with, you can get them to draw an outline of their hand. And it'll work in a similar way, except it's a hand instead of a circle. Once you've done that, around the border of your circle, write down all the things that you've been stressed out about, all the things that have been concerning you, all the things you've pent up and didn't realize were bothering you until you start thinking about them and actively, really being mindful of these things. This really forces you to go through and have that bit of self-reflection. So jot it all down, and it can be anything and everything. So, I put some examples here. But that may be different for you. So even if it's, the noisy neighbors, lawnmower, or whatever it is, put it down. Another 25 seconds. Okay, great. Now you've done that, just take a look and just read it over. Go through your whole circle, read everything word by word, get a sense of your concerns, get a sense of your stressors and the little things that have been bothering you or just making you feel a little uneasy. And then what you're going to do is draw another circle, but this time a bit smaller. And once you do that, start to look at the stuff that you put in your outer circle, your circle of concern, and start to move the things that you have control over. And this is direct control. This is something that you can take responsibility for or accountability for to make it work so that it's no longer a concern. All the things that you think that you can control. And this will be different for everybody. Something in one person's concern may be something else in someone else's circle of control. Now, some of you, if you have the Post-it notes, this is easy because then you can just stick them. For others, you may want to use arrows and just move them into the circle. From a cognitive psych perspective, I remember even during exams, the idea of erasing and rewriting kind of really helps emphasize things. So if that works for you, feel free to scratch out or erase what you put in your outer circle and bring it to the inner circle. Just take a couple minutes or less. Okay, great. So once you've done that, and again, if you didn't get a chance to finish, you can always go back and do this exercise. Once you've done that, draw another circle, and this is a medium circle in the middle of your two circles. Look over what you wrote in the outer circle and identify the items that you can either influence to drive change. So these are the things that you don't think you had total control over, but indirectly or in some way, even if it's like a few degrees of separation away, maybe you can make a small impact to drive change, right? A little micro action or something that even though you can't change it completely, you have an influence in sort of shaping that or helping to make that change. And start to list those. If you consider doing the hand version of this, it would be like the same idea. The stuff is on the outside of your hand. And then what I like to do, especially with kids, when you're thinking about it, is the middle of your hand can be the stuff that's in control, and then the stuff for influence is your fingertips. So that's another kind of neat way to think about it and do it as an exercise. So once you've done all that, you'll kind of walked through sort of your whole experience. In the example that I listed, you know, you start to realize what really is in your control, what you have some influence over, and then what's kind of left and completely out of your control, in which case, you know, there's no reason to take on that burden because you can't do anything about it. So you just kind of park that and focus on the things you can change. Excuse me, sorry. So in the last step, this is where sort of that self-reflection piece comes in. You know, look over your circles, reflect on them, note the actionable items you can take, and if you're a planner or if something like that works for you, make that plan, right? Make yourself accountable to you for the things that you do want to take control over at your own pace, of course. And so that's kind of where you'll start to really be able to identify and realize that all the things that you thought, you know, when you were overwhelmed and feeling all the things, it kind of feels like it's daunting because you don't realize how you're going to sort everything out. And this is a really neat way to kind of see that it's a lot more easier than you think, or more within your control. Sorry, throat is dry. So basically this idea of your circle of control comes from Stephen Covey. And this is the same person who, if you've heard about the, you know, habits of effective people, 7 habits of effective, highly effective people, that is the author, and these principles come from there. And these types of activities are stuff that many educators or, you know, people in this space kind of teach. When you do that, you really get the way to manage your confrontations with mental health. You know, when you're feeling overwhelmed, you kind of get to see, to what degree is this within my control? To what degree can I influence that? And now this in no way negates your emotions. You're human, you're gonna have feelings, but when you work through this and you start to identify the pockets where you can find comfort in that you have control over it, it brings that bit of relief. You do it at your pace, and it just makes you feel a little bit more productive too, and less, you know, sort of disheartened by the whole situation. Micro actions can make some of the biggest differences. So things like the task of making your bed in the morning kind of is a check mark. It's like, hey, I did something today, you know, and it's going to make you feel good and kind of pan out the rest of your day. If working from home has been a challenge for you because you don't have the right tools, maybe a slight change in that, maybe relocating your space to a place that's going to work better for you, even if it's not the most ideal, it's kind of the next level up, contributes to that. So I hope that you kind of have walked through that, and, you know, in the interest of time, it's really hard to list everything, but it is definitely an exercise you can continue to do. You can do with your family, and you can all kind of be a team in managing each of your own sort of mental health related stressors, right? So on that, we continue with self-awareness and self-reflection. So when you're thinking about the actions you're going to take to move from that larger circle of concern into the things you can control or have an influence over, these are the kinds of things you can think and walk yourself through. And they're the simplest things that we don't always think work together, but, you know, psychology and physiology go very much hand in hand and can influence each other. So you start with your basics, right? Am I eating? What am I eating? When am I eating? And you start to notice a pattern there. And, you know, when you eat late at night, does that kind of somehow relate to something that happens to you the next day? Or are you eating or ending eating your day too early and then you're really hungry in the middle of the night? Are you eating foods that your body feels good about? Same thing with rest. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping well? Because quality of sleep is different than hours of sleep. And again, how much am I sleeping? Am I talking about this? Am I sharing my feelings? Do I have somebody I can trust that I talk to? And who is the right person to talk about this, right? Is it my spouse or somebody in my household? Is it a friend? Should I be seeing a professional? And this is where things like even EAP can come in handy. And that's a kind of segue into what we'll see later. If I'm not somebody who likes to talk so much, what can I do to release? Am I writing my feelings down? Am I more of an artist? Do I create? Do I want to paint something? try to notice when you're feeling that way and why, right? Is there something that always happens and it's right before or right after that you notice that feeling? You know, every time I have my tea and, you know, my cat runs across, I notice that, you know, something like, what is it, right? What is the situation surrounding those feelings being triggered? Has anything new happened for you? So from March, you know, what have you noticed? And is that something that was never there before March? Is it something that was there but has been amplified? Try to monitor all that, right? And then with mental health, immediacy is key, because when you're feeling it, you're in that moment, you're in that headspace. You might feel that little thing in your chest or that panic or something coming on. So you really want to work through that. So what do I need right now? Because trying to get an appointment with somebody, you know, or a friend, or try to see somebody who's not available is not going to serve me well right now. So what action can I take? What makes me feel good? What can I control? Who can I ask for help, and who is my support system? So having that kind of in the back pocket is very helpful. And through the exercise that we did, I hope that you found and thought of ways when you create your action plan on how you can check in with yourself, how you know what's going to work for you, and bring that to your self-awareness check. So now the next part, it's not really a part, but it's just emphasizing the importance of breathing. So Maria, you know, walked us through that, and those types of exercises can be really helpful, and surrounding yourself with things that make you feel good. So breathing techniques, especially when you do them in moments of high stress, slow down your heart rate, and they're very helpful. So before you walk into a meeting or a presentation, just taking that moment to really breathe, like purposefully, intentionally, mindfully, will slow down your heart rate. And it's not loading quite yet, but there's supposed to be a picture, there it is, of just something calming. And that's just to emphasize the idea about surrounding yourself with things that make you feel good or calm or really zen, right? And lastly, this is just more of a resource slide, and these are all hyperlinked, so if and when this gets circulated, you'll be able to click. I won't get into too much of the Center of Expertise on mental health in the workplace, and that's from TBS, because I believe the next speaker will talk about that. But all that to say is, on top, you'll see the hashtag FlexGC Trello board. That resource is basically an entire spread of digital post-it notes, or sticky notes, I should say, made by the initiative that I'm a part of, as I said, where a bunch of us have posted links that are helpful resources and tools for you on various different themes, mental health being one of them, but basics of setting up, you know, your office, tools for collaboration, all the things are on that board. In the mental health one is some of the links you'll see from the Center of Expertise, so I'll skip that. What I will also note is there's something called the Going Remote Guide, and that was brought by the Canada School of Public Services Digital Academy on their busrides.ca. There's specifically an episode called Remote Work Defined, and it's supposed to be popular, so check that one out. And outside of the GC space, there's so much you can do to surround yourself and bring yourself into either something where you're taking direct control or influencing to make you feel good. And so social media and community are examples of that. And this by any means is not an exhaustive list, but it's some stuff that might help. Yoga tends to be popular, and Yoga with Adrienne I've heard a lot about, so that's an option for you. What are your other interests, and kind of finding spaces for that. So whether you like to dance or cook or read a good book, joining online communities. You know, when you're feeling isolated, this is a great way to be connected with other people who are probably feeling the same things you are. And one of that is One Team Gov, and that's another group that I'm a part of. And again, I'm happy to share anything on FlexGC and One Team Gov after, so feel free to reach out. Finding positive influencers, so people outside all your circles that kind of, you know, have preached things, or, you know, walk the talk, and they're out there. There are apps that are helpful, especially when it comes to regulating your sleep and trying to get a sense. So Sleep Cycle is one that I actually use and I'm a big fan of. Calm is another great one for meditation. And that's basically it for me. So I will turn it back to the group, and we'll take questions later, I believe.
Thank you, Alia, for setting up the your circle of control activity for our audience and highlighting the importance of self-awareness while working from home. So next, last but certainly not least, we have Sophie Dubourg, who joins us today all the way from Ottawa as well. She is a manager data policy and support with Treasury Board Secretariat, and is with us today to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on public servants, resources available, and tips for managers and employees on how to protect our mental health. So Sophie, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the warm introduction. I'm very pleased and honored to be here. Just to give you a little bit of an overview of what the Center of Expertise is all about, then we'll dive into some tips. And before I start, I just wanted to say that there's no need to write notes about some of the resources that I will be mentioning this afternoon, because following this event, I'll be sending an email to Sarah with a list of resources and some attachments so that we can share with all of you participants, so rest assured. Also, I just want to mention that this is a safe environment, so please feel free to share some of your comments, your feedbacks, solutions, concern, throughout this presentation. I believe there's going to be a question period after all of our presentation, but I just want to remind everyone that yes, let's be frank about having a collective discussion and facilitate discussion when it comes to mental health in the workplace. So just to get started, what the Center of Expertise on Mental Health in the Workplace is all about, well, the Center of Expertise is a center that is co-chaired between TBS as an employer and the Public Service Alliance of Canada, bargaining agent. And it was created back in 2017 to really provide some expertise, advice, and leadership when it comes to psychological health and safety in the workplace within the federal public service. And originally, and up until recently, the mandate of the center was to provide direct support to organizations for advancing the mental health file and to be in compliance with the first federal workplace mental health strategy, a strategy that was launched a year prior to the creation of the center, therefore back in 2016, but also to provide guidance to organizations on how to build a psychological health and safety management system within the organization by adopting what it's called the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. This standard was basically put in place back in 2013. It's a first standard such as this one, not only nationwide in Canada, but also worldwide. So Canada is quite proud of having such standard. And my understanding is that right now, subject matter experts around the world are looking at creating a international standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace. And when I said that originally the mandate was to provide direct support to organizations up until recently, since the pandemic, our Chief Human Resources Officer has turned to the center to see if we can provide more direct support to public servants as they will navigate through the pandemic. And therefore, we answered the call and we have shifted our efforts and shifted our efforts. And I'll get into some of the resources and tools that we have put in place to provide that direct support to public servants. Another piece as part of our mandate is really work closely with our communities of practice. And I'm happy to say that back in spring of 2019, we launched our Office of Primary Interest Network, which is a group of about, we want to say about 120 members representing 67 organizations. So some of you may know directly who your representative is for your organization. And they're really the ones that are hands-on at making sure that the mental health file is addressed, either through a mental health action plan or wellness action plan or actions that are integrated into a bigger plan, such as a people management plan. We've also seen organizations using their values and ethics, a strategy or action plan to integrate mental health deliverables. We also try to raise awareness across the system and provide information to all public servants and organize public service events, but also present, such as an event like this one that we are here today. So now let's talk about the impacts of COVID-19 on Canadians and therefore also public servants. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic is expected to have a significant negative impacts on the mental health of all Canadians over the coming months due to the fears of either contracting the virus, financial instability, and social isolation. We know for a fact that the Canadian Association for Mental Health is actually warning the country, for a second pandemic. So on top of the coronavirus pandemic, we're also talking about a second pandemic when it comes to the mental health of our Canadian. So something to keep in mind as we continue to navigate through this new normal. Many of the protective factors that contribute to positive mental health have suddenly been reduced. We can think about our physical activity, community involvement, but also access to employment and education. Even though we know that recently some of our Canadian cities have decided to reopen in different phases or waves. A review of past pandemics shows that the experience of quarantine is associated with increase of anxiety, depression, but also post-traumatic stress symptoms, and impacts can be felt years later. So you might be experiencing a wide range of reactions going from anxiety, worry, fear, anger, frustration, loneliness, in reaction to a wide variety of new stressors, such as increased health risk for yourself or a loved one, financial concerns, isolations from colleagues, friends, or family, working from home, as we know, and that's the title of this event. There are new dynamics when it comes to balancing work, but also personal responsibility. We can think of childcare, challenges with work equipment or networks, increase or decrease work demands or new demands. And I know some of you in particular, when it comes to work, are a bit of a strange space right now, as you're slowly looking at transitioning back to your regular roles, having been assigned to work on a new priority outside of your team. So you may be feeling a certain level of uncertainty right now, and that could be really stressful. And as one of the previous presentations, it's okay to not feel okay. Uncertainty about the future and so many more. So some folks might even be experiencing trauma from psychological traumatic events, such as the loss of a loved one. We also think of, some of you may have known somebody who contracted the virus and is now a survivor. But as you went through it, it must have been very difficult. First, you're trying to get some updates. You cannot go see the person at the hospital. You're getting worried, and you don't even know what is going to happen. Because as we know, some of our Canadians have survived, but unfortunately, some of us have died. We're all experiencing this pandemic differently and at different levels, and it's really okay, and we must acknowledge this difference. When it comes to negative mental health effects, we know there are some populations at even higher risks. So we call them the vulnerable populations, such as les populations racisées, les personnes vivant un handicap, les travailleurs de première ligne, les personnes vivant avec des troubles de santé mentaux, les autochtones, les aînés, just to name a few of our vulnerable population. According to a web panel survey conducted between March 29th and April 3rd by StatScan, over 1/2 of Canadians reported that they were very or extremely concerned about the health of someone in their household, and 79% were very or extremely concerned about the health of vulnerable population. In a crowdsourcing survey conducted by StatScan between April 24th and May 11th, 52% of respondents indicated that their mental health has worsened since the onset of physical distancing. Federal public service is huge, so safe to say that these stats likely apply to many of us public servants. A lot of changes have occurred, and this is expected. Beaucoup de changements sont survenus, et cela est prévu. Now let's dive into some of the tips for employees. And some of those themes has been mentioned by the previous speaker, so I don't want to be redundant, but I think sometimes it's good to kind of repeat some of the messages so that it can resonate and you can embed some of those practices in your day-to-day life. The first one, be kind to yourself. Practice self-care and self-compassion. And I don't mean like some of the basic stuff like get a bubble bath or something, but I'm really trying to get into like the fundamental activities, such as getting enough sleep, right? And I often say, you know yourself. For instance, if all of a sudden you keep on waking up at 2:25 every night, you know that something is not right. And you really need to take the pause and do a little bit of a self check-in. And I know it's hard work, and a lot of them sounds very simple, and also connectively it is simple, but in practice, it may be difficult to get into some of those best practices. So again, be kind to yourself. Stay connected. Talk to a friend or a colleagues about your feelings or about your concerns. I often say, call someone that you haven't spoken in a while. That person used to be your colleague and you used to go once in a while for coffee, but you haven't really touched base since the confinement, or if you're slowly returning back on site. So, or it could be a loved one, a grandparent, or a cousin that you haven't talked lately. Reach out to that person and get a sense of, how are they doing, so you can bond and reconnect. When it comes to the workplace, of course, I'm going to say check in with your colleagues within your team, but sometimes you want also to check-ins with your colleagues that are outside of your team. Use positive self-talk. It's not business as usual, so don't get down on yourself if you're having trouble working as effectively as you once did. There's no right way to manage your mental health through a pandemic, and remember, you are not alone. One thing you need to do that we would like to recommend is also have some routine. It could be like waking up in the morning, getting yourself ready, going into your workspace at home, making sure that that space is stable so that you're not struggling every day trying to find like a corner of the desk, or right now that we're at home, it could be like a counter in the kitchen or a table in the living room, trying to find something a little bit more stable that this is the right space for you and you can go through it every day just like you used to when you would go on site. Respecting your limits as an employee could be quite challenging. When it comes to the workplace, if you can, set up a separate workspace for yourself, like as I mentioned. But if your role allows it, also sets time to finish work and put away your devices. So when you're done, you turn off your iPhone, your BlackBerry, your tablet, your laptop, turn it off, because it is easy right now that since we're at home to continue to work or to do your 8 to 4, for instance, and then wanting to go back into your workspace or look at your emails at 8 o'clock at night just to see if you can get ahead or just to see if you've missed anything. I think more now than ever, you don't want to start falling into work integration, which is a concept where because of the technology, you're continuously working. Another example of setting limits is to stay informed, but follow new coverage about COVID-19 in moderation. I think I saw like comments on the chat to say, you know what, I've stopped like watching the news, like kudos to be able to acknowledge and say, you know what, I need a break. And it's okay to do that. Or it's okay to just say, I'll take a look at it maybe for like 30 minutes, but I won't keep on going and looking through the channels to see if I can get like news about COVID. And I know at the beginning, it was very difficult because it was new. So we're trying to get some stats of what's going on in Canada, what's going on in the United States, our neighbors, and then worldwide. But making sure that you're getting informed in moderation is quite important. Otherwise, the hamster keeps on going and you're always like questioning yourself and wondering, right? I also had to take care of your body, and the former speakers have touched on it so nicely. So I won't get into that much details, but I think Maria with the stretching exercise, it was so great. Like I stretch and I incorporate exercise in my life, but when I was stretching, I must say, all you could hear is crack, 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 crack. And I was like, oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. Why? Because I know that today I hadn't stretched yet. And then we all know that at that moment when we were doing the exercise with Maria, it felt so great. Now the next step is to embed those good behaviors activities into our day-to-day and trying to push ourselves and make an effort to see if we can take that 5 minutes. And I know all of us, we are so busy and we're trying to work with what we have. But another tip is trying to, again, embed some activities into your day-to-day work life. For instance, if you're taking a call with a colleague or you're having a team meeting, you can, and you're using your iPhone, you can walk around the house just to get yourself going, or you can stand up or change position. Another thing I've heard from other public servants is like before they start their day, they're doing a walk around like the block, a quick walk, or some have taken like a quick run. Or I like to say like, you know what, I don't really have time to exercise, but at least let me get 1 kilometer in. So you're doing that 1 kilometer, but it's good, right? And then you're setting yourself with some challenges every day. I've seen other public servants also identifying challenges on a weekly basis with their family, right? So with kids and with your spouse, saying, okay, this week it's about eating more greens, right? And then you're going through the challenge together. Or this week's is about that 1K that I was just mentioning about. So setting some challenges and goals is really important. And another point about self-care, especially right now, you know, try every day, identify something that you're thankful for. Thankful for your health, thankful for your kids, thankful for your spouse, thankful that you woke up today, you're alive, thankful for the weather. Find something that is of interest to you and just be thankful, because having a sense of hope during this time of uncertainty is super important. Now getting into the tips for managers. So often we say as a manager, you are the lead. Employees are turning to you for guidance, for support, for direction, for vision. And so we want to say that at first, you need to take care of yourself as a manager. And a good analogy that has been used over some of our virtual event is, you know, when you're in the plane, something happens and you have to put the oxygen mask, you put it on yourself first before you can help the person next to you. So it also applies for a manager. You have to maintain and take care of your own mental health so you can address mental health into the workplace and protect the mental health of your employees. So in times of crisis, as I mentioned, the role of a manager is critical. And your employees will be feeling anxious or stressed due to the real or perceived threats caused by COVID-19. And it's important for everyone in the organizations to feel psychologically safe and healthy. And as a manager, it is your duty. You are accountable for the psychological health and safety of your employees. And so here are some key themes, key takeaways that I would like you to take as a manager. First one, connect. Your presence is important. Check in with your employees. Have team meetings. I know managing COVID-19 is time consuming. Some of you have never managed a crisis in your whole career. It is something new, and therefore it's okay. Mistakes will take place. It will happen. We're all human. But it is very important to not only manage COVID-19, but also manage your employees. Another piece is to lead with empathy and show vulnerability. When I say lead with empathy, it's really to give your ear and be able to exercise active listening and creating a safe space for your employees so that they can come to you with concerns or questions. It's about creating an environment based on trust. Before the pandemic, this is something that was part of a manager's competencies, right? Creating a safe space, building trust, getting to know your employees. But now more than ever, getting to know your employees and fostering an environment based on trust is very important. I touched on vulnerability. As a manager, you're also navigating through the pandemic, and it's okay. It's actually a good thing to show vulnerability. So you can say, you know what, removing my manager's hat, guys, it's been very difficult. It's been very difficult to navigate through the COVID. I have my kids here. You can share like any pieces of information that you feel comfortable sharing. And really also kind of like open the floor and say, you know what, if you guys have any concerns or also solutions with some of my concerns as a manager, so I can use a concrete example. A manager can say, you know what, I feel it's hard because I used to stop at people's desk and ask questions and see how they were doing. But now with the pandemic, I don't see people's face. I don't see their reaction. Yes, we have team meetings, but I just want to make sure that I'm doing things right and then everybody feels comfortable coming to me. And if you have any solutions about how I can go about it, please let me know. And it's not about pointing fingers. I like to emphasize on that. It's not about saying, oh, you were a bad manager and you haven't done this, but it's more to say, you know what? I would like to have more support as an employee on that and in this component, on this aspect. And trust me, when you're including your employees as part of the solution, it's a win-win situation. You're not leading in isolation. You're leading collectively with your employees' input. Another point is create certainty, make your expectations clear, communicate them as often as they change, but also create structure, share information as soon as you have it. And when you don't have it, let your employees know that, you know what, I don't have the answers to that, but I'm on it. I'll do some consultations and I'll get back to you either through a BiLab or our next team meetings. Create control, sorry. Give your employees as much autonomy as possible. So when it comes to where they work, when they work, and seek input and feedback on decisions that affect the team and its work. An important part of the latter is making it safe for people to share feedback and ideas, as I mentioned, a concept known as a psychological safety, which is also one of the 13 hazards from the National Standard on Psychological Health and Safety that I mentioned earlier. Another key takeaway, be flexible. Employees are looking for flexibility from their managers during these uncertain times. And as COVID-19 restrictions begin to ease across the country, and each employee will have different needs. For example, some may be uncomfortable returning to the office for a variety of reasons, while others may be eager to go back. They're like, oh, I am done. I want to be on site. I want to see my colleagues. I want to see my friends. So seek flexibility and accommodation solutions from your employees. And while you do that, ensure that you stay inclusive. Everybody, as I mentioned earlier, is going through the pandemic, living the pandemic differently, and every public servants have their own situation. So to be inclusive, because we heard that from previous events where we saw employees saying, you know what, there seems to be a strong emphasis on public servants and employees with kids, but I'm alone. My family members are not around me. I'm going through a difficult time when it comes to the pandemic. So it's really important to be inclusive when you establish those strategies. And I was reading something recently on the Business Development Bank of Canada website, and I really liked the way they framed it. They talked about the leader's priorities when it comes to communication. And I can throw that question, and I would like for you to respond through the chat if you feel comfortable. But why do you think communication is important? Communication effectively with your employees, right? The first one that will come to mind is you want to inform. As I mentioned, you want to give timely, updated information to your employees and let them know that you're looking for the answer. I see engage. You're absolutely correct. You want to keep your employees engaged because research has shown that employees that are engaged will be more motivated, productive, and satisfied. It shows that you care. I see that through the chat. Absolutely. Showing that you care and that you are genuine about it is extremely important. It's one thing to say, I care about your well-being. It's another thing to demonstrate it through action. I'm sure other comments will be coming through the chat, but another one is about reassuring. As a manager, you want to reassure your employees, and a way to do that is to give them regular feedback, right, about their work. Am I doing okay? Do you think, have I delivered according to your standard, according to your expectations? So regular feedback is very important, especially for employees that are working remotely or teleworking. Because as I mentioned, you don't see them, you're not on site, you cannot stop at their desk or calling in a meeting in a boardroom to see how's everybody doing. It shows transparency, very good one. Communication, you don't want to hold information and that all of a sudden your employees are feeling that there's a level of secrecy, or maybe there's information that cannot be shared at the moment. What do you think that will do to your employees? They will start feeling stressed and anxious. And then that level of uncertainty will go higher and higher and higher. And you don't want that. So you want to be able to show that you're transparent, that you're fair, and that you are there for your employee and reassuring them. So we talked about reassurance. We talked about informing them. And one that is linked to the comment made about engage is about you want to communicate to mobilize people. So only express a sense of urgency when it's relevant. Otherwise, employees need a clear vision, identified actions, and clear instructions so they can move forward at their own pace. Now let's get into some key resources and tools. So since mid-March, TBS has acknowledged the impacts of the pandemic and has been supporting senior leaders, organizations, but also employees to prevent, promote, and protect the mental health of employees. A few resources you may want to check out, and as I mentioned earlier, no need to take notes because I'll be sending a list of those resources, but we've put in place a virtual information hub with timely information and accurate resources and tools. I would encourage all of you to access this public website through our center's website, but also by going on canada.ca. Donc, c'est un centre d'information virtuel avec des informations à temps opportun, des ressources et des outils organisés. Donc, je vous encourage à prendre le temps d'aller explorer cette source d'information virtuelle. Some of the themes that we're touching on as part of that virtual information hub is protect your mental health, get help, learn from trusted sources, how to balance family and life, lead with empathy, information for employees on COVID-19, psychosocial risk factors, and many, many more. And what we like about this, it's very concise. So you're not spending a lot of time reading. We really wanted to design those resources so that if you don't have a lot of time, then you can access it whenever you want and at the time that it's suitable for you. TBS supported Health Canada also to launch a new mental health and substance use support portal on canada.ca/coronavirus, but also the Canada COVID-19 app. And this new portal is called Wellness Together Canada. I'm sure you've seen some publicity on TV, but also online. It makes it easier for Canadians to find credible information and help them address mental health and substance use issues. This portal will also connect Canadians to peer support workers, social workers, psychologists, but also professionals for confidential chat sessions or phone calls. And I have to say, it is free. So this app is not only open to all Canadians, but including, of course, the public servants. This was to respond to the increased mental health demand from provincial and territorial phone lines, distress lines, and healthcare providers. And also as a preview pertaining to the Wellness Together Canada app is that there will be new components added to the app. So it's really an evolution and they're really trying to make it the best product possible based on comments received, but also from advice from subject matters experts across Canada. TBS also supported the development of temporary measures for the public service healthcare plan, and these changes include waiving the need for a prescription for physiotherapy or mental health services and the inclusion of social workers and psychotherapists as covered providers. One tool for managers that might also be helpful is the mental health job aids, which was developed by the school, the Canada School of Public Service in collaboration with our center, the Center of Expertise on Mental Health in the Workplace. I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that we are also organizing public servant-wide events. One of them has been the Power Chat. So we had one, I believe, on May 5th. We also had one on June 25th. And rest assured, I'll be sending you the links of the recordings so that you can take a look either by yourself at home, but also as a team. And I often suggest that, as a manager, you can say, here's the link, listen to it, and then we'll reconvene as part of a team meeting to have a discussion about its content. It's really, really good to foster the discussion, but also try to reduce stigma when it comes to mental health in the workplace and raise some awareness, but also as a way to educate ourselves. I also would like to mention that we have a social media presence, so daily social media updates to push out relevant and timely information and tools. And to do so, you can type at CEMHW, and I really encourage us to follow us on Twitter to get up-to-date information, but also get a sense of some of the messages that we're trying to push out. And it's not necessarily always from what we do as the Center of Expertise on Mental Health in the Workplace, but also the work of our colleagues in other streams. So on that note, I'll stop and I'll pass it over back to Sarah.
Thank you, Sophie, for sharing this important information with our audience. I'll be sure to share all the resources with our audience. Before concluding this event, I wanted to check with Josh or Marcella to see if we have any questions or comments from our audience to our speakers. Going once.
No, so I don't. We don't see much in the way of questions. I think everyone has appreciated the conversation.
Excellent. So on that note, I would like to conclude by thanking all our speakers, the Federal Youth Network and Flex GC for your support to making this event happen. And thanks to all of you who participated virtually today and asked really good questions during the presentations. When such fast and unexpected changes happen in our communities, it is important that we as public servants learn to adapt to these changes quickly while protecting our mental health. I hope you'll be able to put into practice some of the tips shared today to ensure your well-being as you continue serving Canadians in the best ways possible. I will be sending a follow-up email with references and resources from our speakers. We also have a part 2 to our event next week on August 5th that will focus on resiliency and coping skills in a stressful environment. I will include all the details in my follow-up email. Until then, stay well.